Good evening. My name is Aggie Lighthizer. I am a member of the League of Women Voters in St. Louis Park, and I'm pleased to have you join us tonight for tonight's forum for legislative candidates for District 46A and 46B. Just would like to go over a few things before we get started. If you have not already done so, those of you here in the room, if you would silence your cell phones so we don't have that interruption. I would also ask that there not be any campaign materials displayed during the forum. There's opportunities for that either outside this room or after the forum is over. Tonight's forum will be rebroadcast on Civic TV 17 until the general election, which is November 4th. And you will find on the back table several things. One is an I Pledge to Vote form, which allows you to commit that you are going to be voting on November 4th, which we, of course, in the League of Women Voters encourage you to do. And I would also, as a little announcement, that there is a meeting that will be here in this room on November 8th, sponsored by the League of Women Voters, called Welcome My Neighbor. It's about immigration in Minnesota. It starts at 9 o'clock on Saturday the 8th. We'll have refreshments again, so you're all welcome to attend that. Tonight's moderator for the forum is Susan Scribner, who is a member of the League of Women Voters of Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, and Hopkins. We're very pleased to have her here with us tonight. And as a reminder, and to make sure everyone is aware, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization, which means we do not endorse candidates or parties. We do, though, support an active citizen involvement in issues and in conversations and efforts that affect our communities, our state, and our country. We encourage all of you to make sure you think about voting and think about being an informed voter. We would also encourage you to consider becoming a member of our organization and help us to continue to provide the citizens of our community with information, with advocacy, and with an opportunity to make new friends and become part of your community. Those of us who are members, many of us who are members here tonight are wearing a button, and we'd be happy to talk with you about our organization. The views in this forum are those of the candidates. Sponsorship of this forum by the League is not an endorsement of any candidate, and all candidates who are running for these two seats have been invited to this forum. We welcome questions from the audience. Hopefully you got a card as you walked into the room tonight. There'll be people circulating still throughout the evening with additional cards. If you have a question, hold up your card and we'll have someone bring it up and it will be added to the questions that we will review. I think that's the end of my announcements, so I will now turn it over to our moderator, Susan Scribner.
Hello and welcome to the evening's program. I also want to thank the Girl Scouts who will be helping with picking up questions from the audience. So they're assisting us tonight, and we appreciate that. As has been noted, I'm Susan Scribner of the League of Women Voters of Minnetonka, Hopkins, and Eden Prairie. For tonight's program, we'll be hosting this on behalf of Districts 46A and B. The candidates will make their opening remarks in alphabetical order, with 46A going first, and that would be Mr. Timothy Manthey. You can start with your opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming out this evening, giving a chance to be able to speak some of the different issues. I've been a long-term resident of St. Louis Park over 30 years, and I've been able to appreciate the community and watch it grow and watch it change. And that's probably one of the greatest reasons why I'm running. So I want to be able to preserve some of the qualities that we have inside of our community and reach out to the different people. My focus is try to get out the vote, try to get people excited. I'm not a highly partisan person. I think that the Democrats and the Republicans and the Independents all have different visions, and I think it all works really well as long as we can all work together. Second reason that I'm running is that same problem, is that politics have become so divisive. People are sitting in the corners and yelling and screaming, and things are not getting done, and there are so many things that need to get done. So I'm trying to be somewhat of a centrist, bring people together, and try to move our community and our state forward. And that's that.
Thank you. Next candidate, again, for 46A is Mr. Ryan Winkler.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out, and to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum and the forums year in and year out that engage citizens in our community and help educate everybody and better understand the issues. I also want to thank everyone here in the room and the community of St. Louis Park, Golden Valley, Plymouth, and Medicine Lake that I've been privileged to represent for the last 2 years. We have a very active and engaged community who pay attention to the issues, look out for each other, and make a difference in the lives of many of the people who live here. So we are very fortunate to live in these communities. I'm running for re-election this year because I think we have so much to do in order to create stronger families, stronger communities, and more engaged citizens around our state. Minnesota has a long tradition of priding itself on having a strong economy and a good quality of life for people who are willing to work hard and be responsible. Unfortunately, because of the changes to our economy in recent years and some changes in people's outlook, more and more people in Minnesota are working harder and having a harder time getting by. Families are struggling. Households are headed by women in this state, but women are making less than men on average. Affordable child care is a major concern. Access to earned sick leave is a challenge for many families. Paid leave when a child is born or when a family member gets sick is becoming available to fewer and fewer people. We have a lot of work to do in Minnesota, and in addition to the successes that we've had in the last legislative sessions, the last 2 years, on things like the minimum wage, a balanced budget, investments in education, we have much more to be done to build on that platform of progress. So I'm here tonight to ask for your vote. I hope to have a very good discussion about the issues with all the candidates, and just look forward to a good debate and a good turnout in our election this year.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to 46B and the candidates, again, starting in alphabetical order. Mr. Bryan Bjornson.
Good evening. My name is Bryan Bjornson. I'm here because I'm a concerned citizen and want to forgot to turn on my microphone. I often don't use a microphone because I happen to have a very loud voice, but since this is being recorded, I need to use the microphone, and I apologize for that. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this on, all of you for coming here, because, like I say, I'm a concerned citizen, and that you all of you have shown up here tonight shows that you are concerned citizens. And one of the things that kind of motivates me was something I had with Paul Wellstone. He told me, I talked with him, and he said, Bryan, you work as hard as you can for what you believe in. Paul will work as hard as he could for what he believed in, and together we would make a great country. You know, people like that are inspirational to me. One of my favorite politicians is a guy by the name of Hubert Humphrey. He said, we can agree to disagree, but still be friends. You know, that's what I try to do, like Tim is, and Ryan, and Cheryl. You know, we have our differences of opinions, but that doesn't mean we can't be friendly, we can't get along, we have different visions of what will make our country better, but, you know, we can work together and we will make this country a lot better. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next candidate, also for 46B, is Cheryl Youakim.
I would also like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum tonight. I appreciate the work you've done to inform voters, and I want to thank everybody that's here tonight and watching at home for being part of the election process. My name is Cheryl Youakim, and I'm running for state legislature to represent the communities of St. Louis Park and Hopkins, now that our very own Steve Simon is running for Secretary of State. I've spent the last 8.5 years on the Hopkins City Council and was reelected to my third term this last fall. At a young age, my parents taught me the importance of public service and standing up for what you believe in. So in 2003, when there were drastic cuts made to early childhood and family education, I couldn't sit on the sidelines. I wrote a grant and co-founded Start Learning Early and began advocating in the West Metro for quality early childhood programs. My advocacy work continued when I joined the Hopkins Human Rights Commission and then the Hopkins Schools Legislative Action Coalition and became active in the DFL. And as a Hopkins City Council member for the last 2.5 years, I've served on the Southwest Light Rail Corridor Management Committee, protecting the interests of both Hopkins and St. Louis Park. But I'm very proud also of my last 8 years I've spent up at the Capitol, the last 8 sessions, working alongside Senator Ron Latz, his first as legislative assistant and then as committee administrator. I see every day how important it is to connect people to the services that they need and what it means when our elected officials actually work for us. From my very first council race, I ran on a platform of reconnecting government to the citizens it serves. And that's why I'm running for state representative, to make sure that government's working for us, because after all, we're the ones paying for it. I've done that as an advocate, I've done that at the city council level, I've done that as a staffer at the state capitol, and I would like to do that as your next state representative. My experience will let me hit the ground running on day one and give these communities the representation that they've come to expect and deserve. I'm asking and I would be honored for your vote on November 4th.
Thank you. We've just concluded the opening remarks for all the candidates, and I wanted to point out at this time that the questions are being provided here tonight by the audience, but should people at home who are watching this like to participate, they could send questions via email to rdunlap@slp.org, and then you can have your questions be used tonight also. So that's just another venue for getting a question from somebody who might be watching at home. Then I just wanted to say that we're alternating the order in which people are going to be answering questions, so we won't always be starting with the same person. And given that, we'll go ahead and get going with the first question, and that we'll start with Cheryl, although I think you may have touched on this. What type of community organizations or public service have you been involved with in recent years? And then also, I'm going to repeat the question if you need it repeated later as we go through the order. So Cheryl, you can start with that.
I'll have to think about this. I've been on the Alice Smith PTO, the Advisory Committee for Early Childhood at Harley Hopkins, the Hopkins Human Rights Commission, the Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition advocating for K through 12 and actually eventually E through 12, co-founded Start Learning Early advocating for early childhood. As a city council member, I've served on the Southwest Light Rail Corridor Management Committee and the Local Economies Committee at the League of Minnesota Cities level, and I've also been a Rotarian, so that's it.
Thank you. And then we'll go ahead and go on to Mr. Bryan Bjornson.
I have not been on the number of committees that and active in public life as Cheryl has, because, as I said, I'm a concerned citizen, and I believe in what our founding fathers created. They believed in a citizen legislature. A person was in the legislature or in government for a couple of terms, and then they went back to private life. Now, I'm 61 years old. If I'm elected, which I hope I am, I will be in office 2 or 3 terms, and then I'm gone. No, this is not a career for me. I am not a professional politician. I've been active in politics for most of my life. My uncle was the state treasurer of the state of Minnesota. My grandfather was the Minnesota State Legislature. I grew up in a political family. So I too will hit the ground running if I am elected to the state legislature, because I have studied politics all of my life. And so, you know, like I say, I'm a concerned citizen, and one of the things I want is, you know, what in your life is not taxed or regulated by the state or federal government? Think about that over the course of the night. What do you do every day that is not affected by the state or federal government in some way? Thank you.
Okay, and then continuing on, do you want me to repeat the question?
I think I've got the question.
Okay, and the next person now, and this is for 46A, Mr. Ryan Winkler.
My primary service in the community over the last 8 years has been serving in the Minnesota legislature. I was first elected in 2006 and have been reelected and tried to do my best to serve ever since. Just by way of background, my wife and I live in Golden Valley. We have 3 children. 2 of them are in the Meadowbrook Elementary School in the Hopkins School District. The youngest is in preschool, and so we're active in our schools. We are active at our church and the preschool where our youngest child goes. And we are just generally active in the community in various ways. But the primary service I've had has been working for you in the Minnesota House of Representatives.
Thank you, and then we'll continue on with Mr. Timothy Manthey.
Could you please repeat the question for me? It's been quite a while now.
All right. What type of community organizations or public service have you been involved in recent years?
Well, being that I've been in the community for over 30 years, boy, that could bring me back ways. I started off on the freight rail reroute 10, 12 years ago, and tried to generate some excitement for that, knowing what was going to be coming down the rails, if you will, and thank God we were able to avoid that bullet. Also in 2000, I ran for state senate up against Steve Kelly in the same district. So that was a good 18-month campaign, and I learned a lot, got out to be able to see a lot of the community, meet a lot of people, did a lot of door knocking. Currently, I am a business owner in Hopkins, so I am an employer as well, and integrate with the community. And I've been active as a, how would you say it, probably best, a community activist in my immediate neighborhood. And I have a lot of really good experiences with the people of St. Louis Park, very much.
Thank you. We're going to go on to our second question. We'll be starting with Mr. Bjornson. And the question is, what role do you believe the state should play in higher education?
According to the Minnesota Constitution, one of the jobs of the state is to provide for a quality education for its citizens. This is one of the areas where there's not much disagreement between myself and Cheryl. I believe that, to provide the best quality education, if it's necessary, raise taxes. But one of the things I think that needs to be done is to make sure that the money that is being spent for education is being spent as wisely as possible. Throwing money at education does not solve the problem. Making sure that the money is spent wisely so that all of the students get the best quality education that they can from grade K through 12 and in college. They get a good quality education. That's one of the constitutional jobs of the state of Minnesota, and it's something that we need to do. And if I'm in the legislature, it will be one of my priorities, because I have a public school education, and it may not look that way, but I got a good education. I want everybody's kids to get a good quality education.
Thank you. This is question number 2, and go ahead, and Bryan Winkler will be next. Did you want me to repeat the question?
No.
Okay.
I haven't. It's become clear, I think, to just about everybody that if you want to have a chance to be in the middle class in this country, you need to have a 2-year technical or a 4-year college degree. That has become the reality in our economy, that the imperative for skills, for education, and for knowledge is greater and greater and greater. At the same time that has happened, state support for higher education in Minnesota has fallen off. In the 15 years ago or so, Minnesota supported about 2/3 of state college and university costs through the public tax dollar, and 1/3 of the cost was paid by students. Today that has reversed, and reversed even worse, so that before the last budget, higher education was funded almost 75% by students and 25% by state sources. That leaves students with mountains of debt. It holds back economic growth. It holds back young people's ability to buy a house, to start a business, to do all the things that we wish people would do. And so we have to have a state commitment to make higher education at our colleges and universities and the University of Minnesota affordable. It is a public good that serves all of us to have more people better educated. It helps our economy grow, it helps those individuals, and it is, in my mind, part of the social compact to make sure that the next generation can get started with the education they need in our economy without going into debt in order to get it.
Thank you. And then we'll continue on, and Mr. Timothy Manthey. Did you want the question read?
Yes, please.
Okay. What role do you believe the state should play in higher education?
I'll have to say that I think Ryan Winkler said it pretty darn well. I'm very concerned about the amount of debt that people are incurring after going to college, University of Minnesota. People are coming out with an enormous amount of debt and having this incredible pressure on them to be able to pay the debt back. It ends up being a debt that goes on a lot of times throughout their lifetime. On the positive note, I think the state of Minnesota has done a very good job promoting higher education. I had the good fortune to attend Normandale Community College, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. I also went to the University of Minnesota for a short distance of time. I think on the whole, the state of Minnesota is doing well. Once again, with Bryan, I'm concerned about that dichotomy of, whenever we have educational issues, do we just continue to throw money at it? I would like to see a little bit greater accountability. I can't tell you exactly how that would happen at this point in time, but I would like to see greater accountability. I'm concerned about tenured professors that are perhaps not performing or doing the best for the students. But on the whole, I think the state of Minnesota is on the right track. We all know the benefits of greater education. I'd also be able to say there's technical colleges and smaller trades type schools that I think are very important as well. College is not for everybody, and there should be opportunities for everyone to improve their education.
Thank you. The last person to speak on this question is Cheryl Youakim. Did you want the question read?
I got it. Our university MNSCU system in higher ed is one of the economic drivers of our state. You just have to look around and see the Fortune 500 companies that have come here for our educated workforce, because they don't come here for our weather. We are spending a lot of money and effort and energy getting our kids ready, K through 12, hopefully E through 12, for a higher education. But that higher education is not going to look the same for everybody. We have to make sure that we're investing as a state, not just in our 4-year bricks and mortar schools, but in our MNSCU system, in our 2-year technical colleges, looking at ways to bring apprenticeships all the way down to the high school level. We have to make sure that when our kids get out of high school, they don't face just 2 choices, which they are right now, a mountain of debt or a minimum wage job. Our colleges have to be affordable and accessible, and we need to go back to the long tradition we've had of investing in our higher education institutions so that we can say that it's the University of Minnesota again and not just the University in Minnesota.
Thank you. And go on now to the third question. It's kind of a follow-up question. We'll be starting with Mr. Ryan Winkler. The question is, how do you believe we should be addressing the achievement gap?
The achievement gap that she referred to is the difference in academic achievement between middle class and affluent students and socioeconomically disadvantaged students and students of color. Minnesota has one of the worst academic achievement gaps or sets of gaps in the nation. Part of that is because we have an exceptional school system for many students, and part of it is because we have a lot of new people in Minnesota, a changing population, and we have not yet figured out how to reach those people the way we have reached people successfully in the past in Minnesota. The best way to do that is to get kids ready to learn before they ever get into kindergarten. That is through early childhood education. And that's one of the areas that I've focused on heavily at the legislature, and I will continue to do if I'm reelected. We started it with a early childhood scholarships program in the last budget that funds scholarships for students to attend high-quality early education of their choice. And the whole idea behind that is that with enough scholarship money and with a high-quality set of standards for all types of child care and early education providers, we will leverage up the quality of child care and early education accessibility for all Minnesota kids. And that is the number one best way that we can possibly attack the achievement gap. There are many other things, but that is the number one best way to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. And this is, would you like the question read? How do you believe we should be addressing the achievement gap? This is Mr. Timothy Manthey.
Thank you. I was speaking to some administrators in the city of St. Paul, and I was shocked to find out that there was 90-some different languages being spoken in some of the different schools. That to me would be an incredible challenge to be able to reach out to these people as immigrants in our community. It simply needs to be done. I think some of the tacks that we've been taking in the state of Minnesota have been very successful. The all-day kindergarten concept, I think, is a great concept. I think the outreach programs that the state of Minnesota has done to be able to follow up has been really quite good as well. Can we do better? Yes, we can. I would also like to say I think there's a contingent of what are we doing for the students who are falling behind in their own home? Are the values of education being taught? Are we overcoming some of the obstacles for them? Try to do as much as we possibly can, and with everybody in the community and family involved. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next candidate to speak is Cheryl Youakim.
I think that addressing the achievement gap starts with our readiness gap. 10 years ago, when I started advocating for early childhood, Rowland came from the Federal Reserve came out with a study that for every dollar that's spent in early childhood, we get $16 back. You want to talk about efficiencies? Early childhood is the best bang for your buck when it comes to closing the achievement gap. We need to get our kids ready for kindergarten so that not starting behind. But that's not the only place it doesn't end there. It also happens in our elementary level schools. We have different programs at Hopkins right now that add licensed teachers in the classroom to help elementary kids, so we're making sure that we're meeting them where they're at. At our junior highs, we start a program called AVID that works with individual students who might not be achieving where they should be achieving. And then at the high school level, we work with kids after school with resource teachers and alternative support groups for kids to come in and get help. You got to remember, childhood doesn't have a rewind. Kids can't start over again in their education. They need our investment now because they're going to be our economic engines of the future and taking care of us. So we need to take care of them.
Thank you. And the next person to speak on this question is Mr. Bryan Bjornson.
Thank you. One of the ways that I think that the achievement gap can be improved, or I would like to see it eliminated, is to raise the standards for the students. Make them, make them work hard on what they're learning. And have them become competent. Because when you lower the standard for students, then they start to goof off, and it's a downward spiral. Raise the standards, and the students work harder, and they learn more, and that's what I think would really help. Raising the standards of what the students need to learn. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go on to the fourth question, starting with Mr. Timothy Manthey. And the question is, what is your position on marijuana legalization?
I do not need to have that question repeated. Thank you. It's been an interesting, long ride on marijuana legislation. It's so vexing because I am of that ripe age where we remembered it so much inside the 60s and 70s, and it was such a big part of the community. And I see the benefits of medical marijuana, and I can see both sides of the issue quite well, and I can see the passion that people have for it. In my heart of hearts, I just don't know if it should be legalized to the point where people can be sitting around the bus stop smoking reefer and have that same sort of freedom in general public to be able to do a personal habit. The other side of me says, whatever you choose to do inside your own home and you're not hurting anybody else is your business. So I guess I really have a mixed bag on that feeling.
Okay, thank you. And the next person answering this question will be Cheryl Youakim.
I'm not there yet. I'm just not there yet. I do believe and have been a supporter of medicinal marijuana, or medicinal cannabis as they're calling it now. Watched the bill come through the legislature. Actually, it came through the Judiciary Committee, where I'm the committee administrator, and it was a 6-hour, very long discussion around the details of how to set up the legal system around it. I think there's going to have to be some tweaking on that. I think a lot of stakeholders came together and saw the absolute necessity to help relieve people's pain, and I'm glad that's starting. But when it comes to full legalization, I would first like to see how we do with medical cannabis, and then maybe have that discussion.
Thank you. And Mr. Bjornson.
I come at this from a rather interesting perspective. I happen to be a recovered alcoholic and heroin addict. I have probably smoked more marijuana than anybody in this room. So I am a strong supporter of the legalization of marijuana. Make it like alcohol. You know, you have to be of a certain age to buy it. If you are driving while under the influence, you're breaking the law. You're arrested. You have to pay go to jail or lose your driver's license. But I think that medical marijuana is something that, heroin is one of the most addictive drugs in the world. It is commonly prescribed as a medicine. Marijuana is not that as addictive as heroin, but we don't allow it to be prescribed as medicine. My nephew out in California owns a medical marijuana shop. So I think it is something that I think that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. And then lastly on this question, Mr. Ryan Winkler.
Thank you. I was a supporter of the bill that passed this year that created a form of medical marijuana in Minnesota. Personally, I think that bill was overly restrictive and would not provide the benefits to the people who needed it the most. I think that we could have gone further, but that was what we could do. I am not principally opposed to full legalization of marijuana, but I think, frankly, we have the advantage of watching what happens in Colorado and Washington before we make any kind of big step forward like that in Minnesota. I think we have an opportunity to learn the pitfalls and evaluate the arguments both from law enforcement, from people concerned about addiction, as well as people who would argue that we are criminalizing people for conduct which is not fundamentally different from alcohol, and it's leading to very disparate enforcement of our laws and putting a lot of people in prison and in probation and in other kinds of incarceration type situations that wouldn't be there if it was alcohol instead of marijuana. So I think there are really some strong arguments. The advantage of being able to watch 2 other states move forward is that we can evaluate those arguments before we make a decision in Minnesota. But I think we are tending in that direction.
Thank you. Now on to the 5th question, a little different trend here, starting with Cheryl Youakim. And the question is, copper sulfide mining is being proposed in Minnesota. If the copper mines proceed, what will the candidates do to protect the taxpayers and, more importantly, our clean water resources for wildlife and human beings? Cheryl, you're starting.
This is going to sound trite, but I believe in science. I believe that this needs to be studied. I know copper sulfide mining has been performed in other states to a large detriment to the environment. I know that Polymet says they have an alternative way of mining, but I need to see that science proved out to weigh whether or not it's worth endangering our clean waters that are so precious to us here in Minnesota. So right now, they're doing a lot of environmental impact studies, and I would like to wait to see what the science tells me.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Bjornson.
One of the greatest memories of my life was one time when I was about 15 years old. I spent an entire month by myself up in the boundary waters, surviving on what the food I carried in and the fish that I caught. You know, we need to protect the environment. We also need to create jobs. You know, how long has civilization been mining copper? You know, I mean, it's one of the things that got civilization going was the mining of copper and using of it. So we need to find a happy medium of the way we can mine the copper and protect the environment. Because I was just up in the range a while ago, and I talked to a lot of people there, and they want the jobs that the copper mining, sulfide mining will bring. But they are also worried about the environment. We've got to find a way to do both.
Thank you. Mr. Winkler?
Thanks for this question. I think it's probably the most challenging public policy question that's facing the state of Minnesota today. The reality is that we have been mining in that part of Minnesota for well over a century, and the mining that has been done there has caused tremendous environmental damage from the perspective of the native state of that landscape. Copper mining, non-ferrous mining, has the potential to do even greater damage. At the same time, we know that those minerals have tremendous value. We know that when you look at the kind of reality of the world that we live in, usually when those minerals are in the ground, they find a way to come out. The question is there a way to do it in a way that protects the water resources in that part of the state and protects Minnesota taxpayers? Frankly, I think the jury is out if there is a way to do that or not. I'm hoping that the review process from Minnesota state agencies as well as the EPA will reveal a way of extracting those resources in a way that is safe, but my fear is that we are going to be taking a risk one way or another. So we have a challenge in figuring this out. And frankly, I'm not sure if more information is going to help us guide the way or not. We may come to the point where we just have to decide whether the environmental risk is worth the economic development. And I just don't know what we are going to be able to decide until we have all that information in front of us. It is a great challenge.
Thank you. Mr. Manthey?
I think Cheryl said it very well. The science of it is very important, and it will have to be looked at from many different ways. And the EPA, the clean water, these are all issues that are going to take time. And I think it's that unique Minnesota perspective that we all deal with. If this was a room full of rangers, everybody would be talking about jobs. And I've been up there plenty. People are hurting. They need work. Families are leaving. Homes are being deserted. It's tough. People need the work. I consider myself an environmentalist. I have a farm in Wisconsin. I appreciate the outdoors. Would I want to see any of my world polluted? Certainly not. But I think we could look at this thing and go on for years and years and years in Minnesota, looking at all the analysis, and perhaps the opportunity to bring back mining in northern Minnesota would move past us. So I hope we can come to some decisive decisions sometime soon.
Thank you. That concludes the opinions on the question number 5. We'll go on to number 6. Mr. Bjornson, this is question number 6. Who, in your opinion, shouldn't own a gun, and how should we keep guns out of people's hands?
The only people that shouldn't own a gun are people that have been convicted of a felony. I'm a strong believer in the Second Amendment. The gun is a tool for self-defense. Nothing more, nothing less. It is the best tool for self-defense. You know, I think that like I say, the only people that should be denied the right to use a gun, own a gun, are people that have committed a felony and have lost their civil rights.
Thank you. Going on with this question to Mr. Winkler.
Thank you. I think the answer to the question of who should not be permitted to own a gun, I think you would include felons. I think you would also include domestic abusers, which is actually a new legislation that we passed in 2014 to prevent them from owning it. And I think we would also say that people who have a diagnosis that suggests that they have a mental illness that could make them dangerous to themselves or to others. And our current version of our gun laws certainly do not catch all of those groups of people. I think background checks related to gun shows and other kinds of handgun sales would help us get some direction there. But I just am a little bit of a skeptic that we are able to stop this epidemic through laws alone. And I hope that we change our attitude culturally and in our society about who should have guns, how guns should be seen, and how they should be used and treated. I'm a gun owner myself. I don't own a handgun. I own guns for hunting. I would never, ever permit those to be in any way available to children or to a casual user or anybody that I thought was dangerous. And we need to change the conversation in our country about guns so that people understand the importance of safety, proper use, and reduce the tendency to believe that guns are a measure of self-defense that leads to paranoia and leads to the kinds of shootings that we've seen in too many cases recently.
Thank you. Mr. Manthey?
Very well said. Very well said. I agree with absolutely everything you said as well. I come from that unique perspective of trampling on the Constitution of the United States. There's so many people that hold that as the standard bearer of where gun ownership remains. Me personally, I am completely worn out on school shootings. I am completely worn out on innocent deaths. The argument that it is the person, not the gun, well, the guns are very, very available in our communities. Yes, I agree, felons should not have guns. Yes, I agree that domestic abusers should not have guns. If they want to have guns, it is so easy to purchase a gun in our country. The climate, the culture needs to be changed. We need to see this thing differently. It's a major, major problem for our country. Me personally, I am completely worn out on school shootings. Just cannot do it anymore.
Thank you. And lastly, to speak on this is Ms. Youakim.
I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe that there's responsible gun owners out there. I've got hunters in my family and gun owners in my family. But I believe there's a hole in our laws. And we see it in our headlines every day with the violence that's out there. And I think it is a little too easy to get a gun. You can go to a sporting goods store and they'll do a background check, which is necessary, but then you could walk across the street to a gun show or even sit at home in front of your computer and purchase whatever you'd like. I believe we need to keep guns out of the hands of convicted criminals and people that would do harm to themselves or others. And I'm very proud of the legislation that passed this year to keep guns out of the hands of convicted domestic abusers. But we need to do universal background checks. I think the last statistic I saw during the debate on the domestic violence gun bill was that 70% of even NRA and gun owners believe in universal background checks. That's where I think we need to go. We have a responsibility to keep our community safe.
Okay. Thank you. And going on to the next question, more of an infrastructure question, and we're going to be starting with Mr. Winkler. As regards roads and bridges, what investments need to be made?
Well, you don't have to drive too long around any part of Minnesota to see that we have some severe shortfalls in the quality of our roads and bridges in this state. When you compare us to our surrounding states, competitive regions in the country, a first-rate transportation system is crucial to economic growth and competitiveness. I would, I guess, broaden the answer, though, beyond just roads and bridges to include mass transit, both rail and buses, and in part because by building long-term infrastructure around mass transit, we can begin to concentrate more of our economic growth along those corridors so that in the future we're not just building more highways to accommodate more traffic and more congestion. We give people a choice and we begin to grow along those areas that provide the kind of density of jobs, housing, and entertainment that people are looking for. So I think we need a comprehensive transportation package in Minnesota. I think that that will be a priority of the legislature after this election in the next session. And I don't think there are very many people around the state who think that the quality of our roads and bridges is acceptable or what we think Minnesota should be able to do.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Manthey.
Thank you. As a child of the 60s and 70s, I watched Hiawatha Avenue in Minneapolis, and I thought, oh my goodness gracious, is that thing ever going to happen? I wasn't particularly a big supporter of it. It happened. Now I'm a supporter. I'm a believer. I see it. You build it, they will come. There's a lot of benefits to light rail. There's a lot of benefits to an intense infrastructure focusing on mass transit. I'm also a firm believer in that we cannot drive ourselves out of the problems that we have in Minnesota simply by buying more gasoline, putting more cars on the road. It's not a long-term solution. So I think that Minnesota's attacking it appropriately. I drive every day. It's a challenge. We have a lot of potholes. We have a lot of problems. I have a lot of problems with bridges falling down, and people were supposed to be taking those things into consideration. And that seems in a lot of ways swept underneath the bridge, if you will. So yeah, we've got some real challenges ahead of us. But I don't not think that we can continue to drive ourselves, single people, in a car, burning gasoline, commuting all the time. There's got to be something better than this.
Thank you. Next to be Ms. Youakim.
Transportation is essential for not just our goods and services to move on our roads, but also employees. And we are going to have almost 1 million more people by 2020, and we can't pave our way out of that. So it does have to be a multimodal system, including transit. But there's another statistic I want to throw out to you that I heard the other day. We have a $50 billion hole in our budget in maintaining our roads and bridges. No number of efficiencies is going to dig us out of that. We need to have all the options on the table, and if that means a gas tax, we've raised the gas tax once in 25 years. I want you to think about your house right now. Can you imagine what your house would look like if you only made an investment in it once in 25 years? Never touched the roof, never touched the furnace, didn't put new windows in. We need to invest in our infrastructure. That means roads, that means bridges, that means transit. And I hope we do get a chance to talk tonight about Southwest Light Rail, because I think that's an issue that's really important for our community. And I'll end there.
Thank you. Mr. Bjornson.
On this issue, I am definitely in the minority. I am opposed to the light rail. I am opposed to it because $1.6 billion of it is coming from our federal government. Our federal government is $17 trillion in debt. Amen. The $1.6 billion is going to come from raising taxes. The Federal Transportation Board has a budget of $53 billion. It has revenue of $39 billion. That means it has a shortfall of $14 billion. That's where the money for the light rail is going to come. We don't have the money for it. And I just read an article about the Green Line. The businesses along the Green Line, now that it has been built, there's a grocery store that's been assessed $6,000 after its business was down 20%. American Radiator, $3,000. A church, $16,000. Goodwill, $14,000. St. John's Hospital, $11,000. And then there the public sector, the independent school district over on University Avenue is being assessed $31,116 to pay for the Green Line. money that could be used for and should be used for education. That's why I'm opposed to the light rail.
Thank you. The next question deals with the legacy amendment. And Mr. Manthey, you start with what changes, if any, would you suggest to how the legacy amendment dollars are allocated?
I'm going to respectfully pass on that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Then the question goes to Cheryl Youakim.
It's kind of like getting stuck with MELD. So, for those card players out there, the legacy amendment is money that is from the lottery, I believe. And right now, the allocation amount is set a certain way. One thing that I learned the other day that surprised me is because it's based on the lottery money, there's a percentage that legacy the organizations get. But there's a large percentage of money that people never claim out of the lottery that's just sitting there in a pool. And those organizations would like to get their percentage of that instead of it always going back to the general fund, because our Constitution and the way we set up our statutes were that those organizations would get that money from the legacy fund. So that's one thing I think I would change, is to make sure that the money that the percentage that those organizations are supposed to be getting from that money, even if the prizes are unclaimed, does go back to them.
Thank you. Mr. Bjornson.
I'm not all that familiar with the legacy amendment and what its purpose for is, but then, as with any government program, I want to make sure that the money that is spent, it goes for what it is designed for, and that the money is as wisely spent as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Winkler?
Thank you. I served on a committee that was responsible for spending the money that was in the legacy funds. And what the legacy fund basically is, there is a trust fund for the lottery, but there is also a legacy fund for a sales tax that voters of Minnesota voted in 2008 to raise themselves. In fact, the legacy amendment in 2008 got more votes than any other item on the statewide ballot. It shows that Minnesotans support the outdoors, they support conservation, they support the environment, they support the arts and culture. That's part of the value that we have as a state. By and large, the legacy funds are spent on good things, habitat, clean water. They are spent on arts and cultural organizations that reach out across the state. They are spent in a lot of good ways, in parks and trails as well. So a lot of the things that Minnesotans really enjoy using. I think that there are always ways to tinker with how the money is spent, and there are lots of debates about where the money is raised and whether it should be greater Minnesota or in the metro area, et cetera. But by and large, I think people can be very confident that the money is going to support the things that the legacy amendment was voted for, which is arts, outdoors, parks and trails, clean water. And I think we can be proud of those investments.
Thank you. The next question, what is your view of Minnesota aid to local governments? And have you noted any pros or cons associated with this program? Cheryl Youakim?
People might hear LGA, that's what they're talking about, aid to local government. When I got on the city council in 2005 in Hopkins, we didn't have LGA anymore. It had been taken out of the budget in 2003 when it was cut. The city struggled. They decided to do a large percentage to fix the budget. They did by making cuts in services. And a very small percentage they raised the levy because we're pretty fiscally responsible in Hopkins. Every year we hoped we'd get LGA back, and every year we were disappointed. But if we did get it back, we always talked about making sure that we used it to pay down debt. Last year we did get LGA back. It's helped us with the levy. And I think it's one of those things that the services people come to expect in their communities shouldn't depend solely on where they live. LGA is a way to balance out the surrounding communities. Let's say Hopkins, we're 2 by 2 miles with 17,000 people in it. We don't have a Mall of America to draw on like Burnsville does. So the fiscal disparities are large in the metro area, but people can but businesses and cities compete for those businesses constantly. So we need a little help every now and then, and local government aid helps that.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Bjornson, did you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. What is your view of Minnesota aid to local governments, and have you noted any pros or cons associated with this program?
I believe that the Minnesota state government should help local governments when necessary. As Cheryl said, there are some, like Hopkins doesn't have the Mall of America to pump money into its treasury. So what we need to do is, local control is best. Local money, local control. But when local control is not possible, then the state of Minnesota should step in and help the communities that need help, and then by transferring the money from. I know this sounds kind of strange for redistributing the wealth of the cities, coming from a Republican, but if a city has a surplus and one city is broke, have the cities help each other. When the cities work together, it makes for a better Minnesota.
Thank you. Mr. Winkler?
Minnesota is one of the few, if maybe, and maybe the only state that has a robust program to make sure that communities all over the state have access to police, fire, decent parks without having their property taxes sky high. And even though property taxes have increased significantly in past years in Minnesota, we are still relatively lucky compared to other states because our LGA program has helped to keep property taxes low compared to most other states. And this is the concept that we all do better when we all do better. If Mankato and Moorhead, if Mankato and Moorhead and Duluth and St. Cloud are all strong regional economies, that helps the whole state grow. We cannot just be a metropolitan area surrounded by farms and forests. We have to have strong communities all over the state. And that's what LGA makes possible. It provides a quality of life throughout the state to help local economies grow. And it helps keep down property taxes, although I recognize that many people would not say that property taxes are low, but it is better than it is in many other places because of it.
Thank you. And Mr. Manthey?
That's probably my greatest point of LGA is I think it can benefit us local citizens from keeping our property taxes low, then I support it. Trying to get all the different municipalities throughout the state to be able to enjoy the money that is brought by LGA, I think that's beneficial on the whole. Then I take the other step. Are we taxing the people of Minnesota so much that we have these funds that are able to be distributed throughout different political machinations? Scares me a little bit. I think on the whole LGA is beneficial. It could be a slippery slope as well, but I definitely support lower property taxes.
Thank you. Our questions are over for now. We're going to start with our closing comments, closing statements. We're going to be going in this order. It'll be 46B candidates, starting with Cheryl Youakim, and then Mr. Bjornson.
Once again, I want to thank you for taking time to be here tonight and to watch the debate at home. And thank you for being informed voters. As a city council member, I've balanced a budget. I've crafted a financial management plan that brought us from a AA- credit rating to a AA+, planned thoughtful redevelopment, and expanded our tax base. Working up at the Capitol, I've helped people connect the services that they need, help bring stakeholders together to produce effective bipartisan legislation and a transparent government. For the last decade as a community advocate and as a public servant, I've had my pulse on what this community values. The last 5 months I've spent knocking on doors, I have literally had thousands of conversations that have reinforced and reaffirmed what I've known all along, and that's that this community values investments in education, transportation, and equality. As your next state representative, I will go up to the Capitol and fight for those values. As you've seen here tonight, my proven leadership and balanced approach makes me the best candidate to hit the ground running and give this community the representation that it's come to deserve and that it comes to deserve and has expected all these years from our very own Steve Simon. Thank you for the time. Thank you for all the conversations at the doors, and I hope those conversations continue. Thank you for being here tonight, and I ask and would be honored to have your vote on November 4th.
Thank you. Now the closing statement for Mr. Bryan Bjornson.
Again, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters, all of you for being here, people watching at home. We need concerned citizens active in our public. And if I'm elected to the state legislature, I will bring my expertise and my knowledge of and my love-hate relationship with government to the legislature. We need a good quality life here in Minnesota. The best way that can be achieved is let people run their own lives. The legislature has a job to do, but it's a limited job. The federal government has a job to do, but it's a limited job. Who is best to run your life? Me over in St. Paul or you yourself? I believe you are the best person to run your life. I want to get government out of your life so that you can run your life the way you see fit. And so one of the things I seek to do is repeal laws. And one of the laws I would like to repeal is the law that requires the state of Minnesota, your employer, to deduct taxes from your paycheck. By doing that might make things a little difficult, but if everybody sits down and has to write out a check to pay their taxes, then when I'm over in St. Paul as your state legislator, if you decide to vote for me, I am more accountable because you are sitting there paying my salary every 2 weeks when you write out a check. I want the people in St. Paul to be as accountable to the people of Minnesota as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Winkler.
In the last 2 years, Minnesota has seen tremendous progress in a number of areas. A two-year tuition freeze at our state colleges and universities, a minimum wage increase, early childhood scholarships, all-day kindergarten, a balanced budget, a tax on the richest 2% of Minnesotans to pay for many of these investments, and the inclusion of all of our families in our community in the definition of marriage. That is a record to be proud of. We have invested in our future, we have balanced our budgets, and we have recognized the value of our citizens. But we have tremendous challenges in the years ahead. We have a slow undermining of the minimum wage and of equal opportunity for all people in our society taking place. We have climate change concerns. We have a renewable energy future that is wide open in front of us if we are ready to take it. Minnesota has a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenge, and that is what I go to St. Paul to work on every day, to try to make sure that Minnesota is one of the states that leads the nation in showing that strong families, strong communities, engaged citizens are the way that we build a better future together. And I firmly believe that your engagement in this debate tonight, in voting, in working on campaigns, working on issues, being involved in our community, that is how we best shape our future together. So I want to say thank you again to the League of Women Voters for convening this, to all of you for participating, and I ask for your vote on November 4th to go back to St. Paul and try to do the best I can to make our community and our state one of the shining examples of a community that is meeting the challenges of the future and taking care of all the people in our state as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the closing statement of Mr. Timothy Manthey.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters. I appreciate being invited. It's a great forum. I spent a lot of time over the last 30 years talking to a lot of our local citizens. And I have to tell you, a lot of people are really hurting. There's a lot of people that are underemployed, There's a lot of people that have just simply left the unemployment rolls. There's a lot of people that are feeling the stress and the pain of being overtaxed. I see when I talk to people at their doors. I see when I talk to people at the bus stop. I listen to people when I go about my business. It's a challenge. It is really, really a challenge. One of the greatest reasons why I'm running is because I am so tired of this consistent divisiveness of Republicans and Democrats. I urge so many people to look at our gorgeous state of Minnesota and all the beautiful opportunities that we have. And let's face the facts, we have a pretty darn good amount of money in this state. We've done a very, very good job allocating the money to the citizens. I think there's a whole lot of people in the business community and the everyday community that feel like they're being overtaxed. And that's a challenge to a lot of people. So I'm trying to get our community to be able to keep the divisiveness away. Let's look for the best that Minnesota has. And I think we have a great state, and there's a lot more beautiful things to be done in this state. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank all of our candidates tonight for their participation. It makes it much more interesting when everybody shows up. I also want to note that this is going to be on cable TV. You'll have a chance to see it again. I don't know, I think it's channel 17, but I'm sure our hostess will be able to tell us that. Thanks again. My name is Susan Scribner, and I'll turn it back over to our hostess.
Thank you, and I would like to thank Susan for being our moderator tonight and for handling the candidates with a great deal of skill. And I'd also like to thank the candidates for being here tonight. I think they had some tough questions tonight. And I know that we did not get to all of the questions that everyone had, so hopefully there's some time that you will have to stay for a little bit and have an opportunity to continue the conversation. I'd also like to thank the City of St. Louis Park for the use of this room, and to Reg Dunlap, who is the public television coordinator for the city, who makes these kinds of situations possible and makes it possible for those of you to sit at home comfortably and watch this show. And I know all of you who attended tonight will want to go home and watch this show again and again and tell all your friends and neighbors about the evening that you spent here tonight. I also want to remind you and encourage you and hope that you continue to talk about the election coming up on November 4th. It would be absolutely fabulous if our Senate district had the highest voter turnout this year. So let's plan on that, okay? Absentee ballots are now available from the city, and you can request a ballot by calling the city clerk. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park, and those are the members who were here tonight who helped make tonight work out and have all of the things that we needed to work, thank you for that. Thank you for those of you who are here in the room with us tonight, and thank you to those watching on TV. Good night.